Before we dive into this latest sci-fi epic, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The Citadel station wasn't merely large, it was an affront to physics, a monument to the hubris of elder races. A kilometers-wide spindle of crystalline structures, shimmering energy fields, and gravitationally improbable docking arms, it hung suspended in the void between the twin stars of Cygnus X1, the designated heart of the nascent Galactic Council. For centuries, it had been the stage upon which the fates of star systems were decided, dominated by species whose histories stretched back millennia before humans had even conceived of chipping flint. And now, humanity was here. Represented by Ambassador Elias Thorne. Thorne adjusted the collar of his Terran Union diplomatic tunic, a deep navy blue, simple, functional, almost aggressively unassuming compared to the flowing robes, articulated carapaces, and shimmering energy-woven attire of the other delegates. He stood at the observation window of his assigned quarters, luxurious by human standards, but pointedly smaller and located in a less prestigious sector than those of the founding council members. The message was clear: you are new. You are minor. Know your place. He gazed out at the impossible architecture, the endless streams of alien vessels gliding through designated transit corridors, the sheer, overwhelming scale of it all. Humanity, barely a century out from its first FTL jump, was the toddler crashing the adult's dinner party. They were tolerated, barely, mostly out of a detached curiosity and the potential for new markets and resources to exploit. Thorne, a veteran diplomat seasoned in the brutal back and forth of intrasystem human politics, felt a familiar knot of apprehension mixed with steely resolve. He wasn't naive. He'd read the briefings, analyzed the intercepted communications, felt the cold condescension in the preliminary vid calls. The K'tharr Imperium, hulking reptilian warriors who viewed honor and strength above all, saw humans as soft prey. The Psylan Concordance, ancient, ethereal beings of immense psionic power, regarded humans with the detached pity one might reserve for a clever but ultimately limited animal. The Zylar Guilds, amorphous blobs of sentient, profit-driven silicon, viewed Earth and its colonies as untapped assets ripe for acquisition. Even the Galactic Hive, usually inscrutable, had transmitted data packets analyzing human, inherent chaotic individualism as a species-level flaw. They despised humanity. Not with overt aggression, not yet. It was the deeper, more insidious contempt of the established order for the upstart, the suspicion that these noisy, rapidly expanding primates were little more than a brief, messy flare in the galactic pan. His aide, Commander Eva Rostova, entered the room. Her uniform was equally practical, the insignia of the Terran Union Navy discreet on her shoulder. Her face was impassive, but her eyes, sharp and analytical, missed nothing. "Ambassador," she said, her voice calm and low. "Final security sweep complete. No active surveillance detected within the designated diplomatic suite, beyond the standard station monitoring." Standard station monitoring being enough to track a dust mote's trajectory from orbit, I imagine, Thorne replied wryly. "Substantially more, sir. But nothing specifically targeted at us, yet." Rostova handed him a data slate. The preliminary agenda for the opening session. As expected, our petition for fair trade arbitration regarding the Xantas reroute is buried under new business, lesser concerns. Thorne scanned the slate, his lips thinning. The Xantas reroute was a blatant power play by the Zylar Guilds, diverting lucrative trade lanes away from burgeoning human colonies, strangling their economies before they could gain traction. It was theft on a galactic scale, disguised in bureaucratic jargon. "Lesser concerns," he muttered. "The livelihoods of billions, a lesser concern." "They don't perceive us as peers, Elias," Rostova said, dropping the formality for a moment. "They see us as inconvenient. We need to change that perception, Eva. Diplomacy first, always. But they need to understand that an inconvenient doesn't mean the defenseless. Rostova nodded, her expression unreadable. "The contingency is in place, sir. Shadow protocol active. They remain unseen, unheard, until required. The contingency. Thorne preferred not to dwell on it, but its presence was a cold comfort. A small, highly specialized team from the Terran Special Operations Command, Ghosts in the Machine, experts in arts the galaxy had largely forgotten or deemed unnecessary in an age of energy shields and orbital bombardment. Close quarters combat, infiltration, counter-espionage, silent elimination. Skills honed in the brutal, messy conflicts of Earth's past and the pirate skirmishes of humanity's extrasolar expansion. They were Thorne's hidden ace, his insurance policy against the galaxy's disdain boiling over into something more direct. Codename, Cerberus Team. 3 fire teams, 9 operators in total, plus support. Unmarked ship, cloaked and drifting in the station's vast sensor shadow. Team members infiltrated onto the station itself, disguised as maintenance crew, low-level traders, even embassy administrative staff. Unseen, unheard. Let's hope they remain that way, Thorne said, straightening his tunic. Time to face the music. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to awe and intimidate. A vast amphitheater carved from some iridescent obsidian-like material, tiered levels rose towards a domed ceiling that simulated the swirling nebulae of the Council's founding systems. Floating platforms served as delegation pods, shimmering with energy shields and displaying holographic insignia. The air hummed, not just with technological processes, but with palpable tension and the low thrum of 100 different alien languages being processed by universal translators. As Thorne and Rostova entered, guided by impassive station security drones, a wave of sensory input washed over them, the musky scent of the K'tharr delegation, the faint psychic pressure emanating from the Psylan pod, the clicking and whirring of the Zylar representatives' interface units. Their designated platform, positioned low and near the periphery, felt like the cheap seats. Heads turned as they approached. Reptilian K'tharr eyes narrowed in undisguised assessment. Psylan delegates remained serenely motionless, yet Thorne felt a distinct mental probe brush against his consciousness, subtle, condescending, like someone idly examining an insect. He'd been trained for basic mental defense, enough to present a calm surface, but the intrusion was galling. The Zylar contingent shifted their amorphous forms, internal lights pulsing as they undoubtedly updated financial models incorporating humanity's perceived weakness. The council speaker, a venerable being of pure energy known only as Clumine, pulsed gently at the chamber's focal point. Its synthesized voice echoed, calm and ancient. The 142nd cycle of the Galactic Council is now convened. We acknowledge the presence of the Terran Union delegation, participating in their first full session. A ripple of polite, utterly meaningless acknowledgements flowed through the chamber. Thorne inclined his head, keeping his expression neutral. The session droned on. Trade disputes between elder races, resource allocation debates spanning parsecs, reports on stellar phenomena. Thorne listened intently, absorbing the intricate dance of galactic politics, the veiled threats couched in diplomatic language, the alliances shifting like sand dunes. When the agenda finally reached new business, lesser concerns, Lumine gave a brief, almost dismissive pulse. The Terran Union has petitioned regarding the Xantas corridor trade rerouting. Ambassador Thorne, you have the floor. Brevity is appreciated. Thorne activated his platform's microphone. His voice, clear and steady, cut through the low hum. Honorable Speaker, esteemed delegates. The Terran Union comes before this council not merely as newcomers, but as members of a galactic community founded, we believed, on principles of mutual respect and equitable conduct. He laid out humanity's case, presenting clear data on the economic impact, the established prior agreements, the lack of consultation. He spoke of fairness, of interstellar law, of the spirit of cooperation the council supposedly embodied. He was met with silence, then a low, guttural chuckle from the K'tharr platform. High Marshal Volag, a scarred veteran whose scales were the color of dried blood, activated his own microphone. His translated voice boomed, laced with contempt. Ambassador Thorne speaks of fairness. An amusing concept from a species whose entire expansion has been characterized by opportunistic speed rather than strategic depth. The strong dictate the flow of resources. The Zylar Guilds acted within their rights to optimize trade routes. If Terran colonies cannot compete, perhaps they are not fit for the galactic stage. A murmur of agreement rippled through several delegations. Before Thorne could formulate a diplomatic rebuttal, a representative from the Zylar Guild, a shifting mass designated Unit 734, pulsed its internal lights. Ambassador Thorne's data, while quaintly presented, omits crucial market variables and logistical necessities favoring the reroute. It is a matter of efficiency, not malice. Its synthesized voice was smooth, oily, dismissive. Thorne felt a familiar frustration building, the kind he'd felt dealing with entrenched corporate interests back on Earth. They weren't listening, they were rationalizing. He opened his mouth to counter, but the Psylan elder, seated on their serene platform, raised a slender, multi-jointed hand. A wave of calming, yet profoundly dismissive, psychic energy washed through the chamber. "Patience, little one," the thought echoed, not in words, but in pure condescending intent, directly into Thorne's mind. "Your concerns are noted. They will be deliberated upon by wiser minds, in due course." The message was clear: sit down and shut up. Thorne clenched his jaw but forced himself to incline his head slightly. "Thank you for your consideration, Elder. We trust the Council's wisdom will prevail." He deactivated his microphone, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality, but his heart pounded with anger and the chilling realization of their utter isolation. They were flies to be swatted away. As the session moved on, Rostova leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Psychic damper readings spiked from the Psylan pod, sir. Direct mental suggestion. Blatant violation of Article 7 of Council Interaction Protocols." "File a protest later, Eva," Thorne murmured back. Quietly. "For the record. They won't care, but we need it documented." He looked around the chamber, at the powerful, ancient races secure in their dominance. They saw humanity as a nuisance. And nuisances, sometimes, needed to be removed. The thought sent a chill down his spine, colder than the station's recycled air. The council session adjourned for a cycle break. Thorne and Rostova returned to their quarters, the silence heavy with unspoken tension. Thorne loosened his collar, pacing the length of the main room. "They didn't just dismiss us, Eva. They humiliated us. Vorlag practically called us weaklings, the Zylar accused us of stupidity, and the Psylan elder patted me on the head like a child." "It was calculated, sir," Rostova said, reviewing security feeds from her console. "A coordinated display to put us firmly in our place. They underestimate our resolve. Or they simply don't care," Thorne sighed, sinking into a chair. "Maybe they're right. Maybe we are just—" A sudden, almost imperceptible flicker of the lights cut him off. Rostova was instantly alert, her hand hovering near the concealed sidearm beneath her jacket. "Power fluctuation?" Thorne asked. "Unscheduled," Rostova replied, her eyes scanning the room, her console flashing alerts. "Localized to this sector. Environmental controls momentarily offline, life support stable, internal sensors." Her voice trailed off, her brow furrowed. Something just bypassed the suite's primary sensor net. "Minimal energy signature, biological, it's inside." Thorne felt his blood run cold. "Contingency." Already alerted, Rostova whispered, drawing her sidearm, a sleek Terran kinetic pistol. "Shadow protocol is active. Stay put, sir." The air grew thick, heavy. Thorne strained his ears, hearing only the faint hum of the station beyond their soundproofed walls. Then, a flicker of movement in the periphery, near the darkened archway leading to his private study. Not movement, exactly, but a distortion, like heat haze rippling over polished chrome. Stealth field, Thorne realized. Primitive by galactic standards, but effective in low light against standard sensors. Rostova moved with fluid, practiced grace, positioning herself between Thorne and the distortion, her weapon held steady. Identify yourself, she commanded, her voice sharp. The distortion solidified. Standing in the archway was a figure unlike anything Thorne had seen depicted in the xenobiology databases. It was vaguely insectoid, tall and impossibly thin, with multiple limbs ending in wicked-looking barbs. Its exoskeleton seemed to absorb light, shifting between shades of grey and black, making it hard to focus on. Its head swiveled, multifaceted eyes gleaming with cold, alien intelligence. A Xylosian Shadow Stalker, infamous assassins for hire favored by the Zylar Guilds for their natural camouflage and neurotoxic stingers. The Stalker moved with unnerving speed, scuttling forward, one barbed limb raised to strike. Rostova fired twice, the pistol shot surprisingly loud in the confined space. The kinetic round sparked harmlessly off the Stalker's carapace. It hissed, a dry, rasping sound, and lunged. Suddenly, the room plunged into absolute darkness. Not just the absence of light, but a profound, sensory-depriving blackness. Emergency lighting failed to kick in. Thorne instinctively dropped to the floor, covering his head. He heard a sharp gasp, "Rostova?" followed by a sickening crunch and a skittering sound. Panic clawed at him. He was blind, helpless. Where was Rostova? Where was the Stalker? Where was the damned contingency? Then, silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but felt like an eternity. The lights flickered back on, stabilizing. Thorne blinked, adjusting. Rostova was on her feet, weapon still raised, but her eyes were wide, staring not at the archway, but at a spot near the center of the room. The Xylosian Shadow Stalker lay sprawled on the deck plating. Its stealth field had failed, revealing its dark exoskeleton, now cracked and leaking viscous blue ichor. Its head was twisted at an impossible angle. Its limbs were still. Standing over the corpse, materialized as if from the very shadows, were 2 figures. They wore non-reflective, grey environment suits, form-fitting, devoid of any insignia. Their faces were obscured by polarized visors. One held a compact, silenced projectile weapon, the other was wiping a vibro-knife clean on a piece of cloth, the blade humming faintly. They moved with an eerie lack of wasted motion, their posture radiating lethal competence. One of them, presumably the leader, tilted their helmeted head towards Rostova, then Thorne. A synthesized voice, filtered and toneless, echoed softly from their helmet speaker. "Ambassador. Commander. Threat neutralized. Sector secure." Rostova slowly lowered her pistol, her expression a mixture of shock and relief. "Cerberus Team. Call sign Wraith, Commander," the synthesized voice replied. "My associate is Breaker. The localized EMP and light absorption field were ours. Standard counter-infiltration protocol for Class 3 stealth signatures." Thorne slowly got to his feet, staring at the dead assassin, then at the 2 silent figures in grey. They were human, he knew, but they felt different. More predator than diplomat or soldier. The sheer speed and efficiency of the takedown, executed in complete darkness, was staggering. The Xylosian was renowned for its speed and senses. "How?" Thorne began, gesturing at the dead alien. "Exploited blind spots in its multispectrum visual sensors during the disorientation phase," Wraith stated flatly. "Close quarters engagement negated its ranged advantage. Exoskeleton vulnerable at cervical joint articulation. Simple. Clinical. Brutal." Breaker, the one with the knife, finished cleaning his blade and retracted it with a soft click. He gave a curt nod. "We detected the intrusion the moment it breached the secondary perimeter," Wraith continued. "Allowed it entry to confirm hostile intent and identify its origin signature." He tapped a device on his wrist. "Data confirms Xylosian origin, consistent with Zylar Guild modus operandi. Evidence secured." Another flicker, and a 3rd figure materialized near the entrance, Ghost, likely their overwatch. Same grey suit, longer rifle held loosely but ready. There may be more, Thorne said, his voice tight. Unlikely a coordinated team for this initial probe, Wraith replied. This was likely a test. To gauge your security. Your response. He paused, his helmet seeming to look directly at Thorne. They have their answer. What now? Rostova asked, holstering her weapon. We sanitize the scene, Wraith said. The station authorities cannot know of this, nor of our presence. We will dispose of the asset. You will proceed as if nothing happened. Maintain your routine. They will be watching your reactions. Thorne stared at the dead alien, then back at the emotionless visors of Cerberus Team. These were the shadows humanity had brought to the stars. Not explorers or diplomats, but silent, ruthlessly efficient protectors. The galaxy thought they were dealing with naive newcomers. They had no idea. Do it, Thorne said, finding his voice. And Wraith, thank you. The helmet dipped fractionally. We serve the Union, Ambassador. Within minutes, it was as if the Xylosian had never existed. Breaker and Ghost efficiently bundled the corpse into a disposal shroud designed to mask biological and energy signatures. Wraith used handheld devices to scrub the area, erasing any lingering energy traces, any stray DNA, any sign of the brief, violent struggle. The lights returned to normal, the environmental controls hummed back to life. The only evidence was a faint, quickly dissipating metallic tang in the air, and the chilling memory burned into Thorne's mind. As quickly and silently as they had appeared, the three Cerberus operators vanished, melting back into the station's background noise. Rostova checked her console again. All systems green. No alerts. As if nothing happened. She looked at Thorne, a new respect, perhaps mingled with apprehension, in her eyes. They're extremely proficient, sir. Thorne nodded slowly, walking over to the window, looking out at the glittering, indifferent citadel. They sent an assassin, Eva. A professional killer, likely hired by the Zylar, perhaps with the K'thar's tacit approval or the Psylan's indifference. They tried to decapitate our mission before it even truly began. He turned back, his expression hardening. They wanted to test us. They wanted to see if the noisy newcomers would fold at the first sign of real pressure. A grim smile touched his lips. Well, lesson learned, I hope. Humanity doesn't fold. We hit back. The game had changed. Diplomacy continued, but now, unseen, unheard, the Cerberus waited in the shadows. And the galaxy had just received its first, bloody hint that the humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. News, even suppressed news, has a way of traveling on a station as interconnected as the Citadel. The Xylosian Shadow Stalker hadn't simply vanished, it had failed to report back to its Zylar handlers. Unit 734, within its insulated pod, registered the lack of communication with a series of rapid internal light pulses indicating confusion, then annoyance. A Class 3 operative, dispatched for a simple termination of a soft target, gone silent? Unprecedented. Subtle inquiries were made through secured backchannels. Maintenance logs were cross-referenced. Sensor ghosts were analyzed. Nothing. It was as if the assassin had ceased to exist upon entering the Terran delegation sector. The K'tharr delegation, under High Marshal Vorlag, noted the Zylar's unusual electronic chatter and the faint psychic ripple of frustration from the Psylan pod. Vorlag stroked his throat spines, his reptilian eyes narrowed in thought. He hadn't sanctioned the hit, too dishonorable for a first strike, but he hadn't discouraged the Zylar either. The humans' unexpected survival was intriguing. Perhaps they weren't as soft as predicted. Or perhaps they possess some unknown technological countermeasure. The Psylan Elder remained outwardly serene, but its deep-level mental scans of the Terran ambassador now met a peculiar static. Not a shield, not a block, but an unpredictable interference pattern, like trying to listen to whispers in a hurricane. It was unfamiliar, unsettling. Had the primitive humans developed some crude but effective psychic jamming? Or was something else masking their thoughts? Thorne, meanwhile, maintained his diplomatic routine with unnerving calm. He attended subcommittee meetings, submitted revised data packets on the Xantas reroute, which were still ignored, and engaged in polite, formal conversations with other delegates during recesses. He showed no fear, no anger, no sign that anything out of the ordinary had occurred. This, more than anything, began to unnerve those who had expected panic or, at the very least, a formal protest about lax station security. Rostova, following Wraith's instructions, filed a low-priority report citing a minor environmental system malfunctions in their quarters, burying it in bureaucratic noise. But the architects of the failed assassination were not deterred. Annoyance festered into resolve. The human diplomat was proving unexpectedly resilient, perhaps even protected by some crude, unknown means. A more definitive statement was required. The Zylar, K'tharr, and subtly nudged by silent suggestion, pooled resources, albeit discreetly. This time, no single operative. A coordinated team. Professionals known for handling complications. Their target, Ambassador Thorne during his transit from his quarters to a scheduled cultural exchange event, a neutral ground, but one requiring movement through semi-public station corridors. The plan, overwhelm any potential security, neutralize the target quickly and decisively, and make it look like a tragic failure of station infrastructure or a random act of piracy. Plausible deniability was key. The team selected was a deadly triad, a pair of Cth'ric Blademasters, insectoid mercenaries renowned for their speed, for razor-sharp limbs, and energy-resistant exoskeletons, excelling in close-quarters chaos, a Grolian Void Weaver, a bulky quadruped capable of generating localized spatial distortions like micro-singularities to disable shields and sensors, and rounding out the group, a rogue Psylan adept, exiled for unethical practices and specializing in offensive telepathic assaults. Designed to induce terror or paralysis. A formidable team, designed to counter conventional security and overwhelm any singular guardian. They believed Thorne was protected, perhaps by a single, highly competent bodyguard, like Rostova, or a piece of advanced Terran tech. They couldn't conceive of a hidden, integrated special operations unit. The transit corridor was moderately busy. Gleaming walls reflected the soft, ambient light of the citadel. Hover platforms and pedestrians glided along designated lanes. Thorne walked calmly, flanked by Rostova, seemingly just another diplomat moving through the station's arteries. But Thorne felt it, a prickling sensation on his skin, the faint buzz of Wraith's encrypted comms in his hidden earpiece. Multiple energy signatures converging, non-standard emissions, kinetic and psionic traces detected. Threat level amber. Rostova's hand subtly moved closer to her side arm. Thorne kept walking, his pace unchanged. Outwardly, he was the picture of composure. Inwardly, his heart hammered against his ribs. The attack came without warning. Suddenly, the air twisted. A meter ahead of Thorne, reality seemed to warp. A shimmering distortion appeared, the Void Weaver's micro-singularity, designed to block their path and shred any frontal defense. Simultaneously, the ambient noise of the corridor intensified into a deafening psychic screech, the Psylan Adept's assault, aimed at overloading Thorne's and Rostova's minds, inducing panic and paralysis. Thorne gritted his teeth, the mental defense training kicking in, turning the screech into a painful but bearable roar. He saw Rostova stagger, her hand flying to her temple, but she stayed upright, her training holding. Civilians screamed, scattering in panic as the singularity pulsed ominously. From side alcoves burst the two Cth'ric Blademasters. They moved in a blur of clicking limbs and flashing blades, ignoring the fleeing civilians, their multifaceted eyes fixed solely on Thorne. Fast, lethal, designed to close the distance instantly. It should have been over in seconds. A blocked path, a psychic stun, and swift decapitation by the Blademasters. It wasn't. From the ceiling panels above, two figures dropped silently, landing between Thorne and the Blademasters. Wraith and Breaker. Their grey suits seemed to shimmer for a second as they deactivated optical camouflage. Simultaneously, from a maintenance access tunnel Thorne hadn't even noticed, Sci-Fi emerged, deploying a tripod-mounted device that hummed with barely contained energy. Ghost materialized atop a nearby kiosk, rifle already shouldered. The Psylan adept, hidden in the fleeing crowd, focused its mental assault on the two grey figures who had appeared from nowhere. It expected minds to shatter, bodies to collapse. Instead, it felt its psionic probe hit nothing. Or rather, something cold, artificial, and utterly unyielding. Wraith and Breaker's helmets weren't just visors, they housed sophisticated counter-psionic dampeners interwoven with micro-AI filters. The adept recoiled mentally, shocked. The K'tharr Blademasters, momentarily surprised by the sudden appearance of defenders, didn't hesitate. They charged, blades flashing. Breaker met the first one head-on. He didn't try to block the slashing limbs. Instead, he moved inside the attack radius with impossible speed, his movements a blur of dodges and parries using his forearms, reinforced with kinetic dampeners. One K'tharr blade scraped sparks off his suit. Breaker slammed the pommel of his vibro knife into the Blademaster's primary optical cluster, then drove the humming blade up under its mandible, severing neural connections. The alien convulsed and dropped, limbs twitching. Wraith engaged the second Blademaster. His movements were different, less direct force, more fluid evasion and precise counter-strikes. He carried two silenced pistols. He didn't aim for the hardened carapace. He fired relentlessly at the joints, the limb articulations, the sensor clusters. Each shot placed within human accuracy. The Blademaster, used to shrugging off energy bolts and relying on its speed, found itself crippled, its movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated as hydraulic fluid and ichor sprayed from pierced joints. A final shot punched through an ocular node, and it collapsed. All this took less than 5 seconds. Meanwhile, Sci-Fi's device flared to life. A directed wave of counter-frequency energy washed over the Void Weaver's singularity. The spatial distortion flickered violently, then imploded with a sound like tearing fabric, leaving behind only a faint smell of ozone. The Grolian Void Weaver roared in frustration and pain as the feedback overloaded its delicate bioorgans responsible for the manipulation. Before it could recover, a single, high-velocity round from Ghost's rifle, fired from atop the kiosk, punched through its thick hide, hitting a critical nerve ganglion. The massive alien shuddered and fell silent, its bulk crashing to the deck. The Psylan adept, realizing the assault had gone catastrophically wrong, tried to flee, attempting to blend back into the terrified crowd. But Sci-Fi wasn't finished. He swiveled his device, locking onto the adept's unique psionic signature, now clearly isolated. He fired a different kind of pulse, not destructive, but disruptive. The adept screamed, clutching its head as its own powers turned against it, creating a feedback loop of pure psychic agony. It collapsed, writhing on the floor, incapacitated but alive. Captured. The corridor fell silent, save for the whimpering of terrified civilians and the low hum of Sci-Fi's device. Dust motes danced in the air. For highly dangerous, specialized assassins, dispatched by the galaxy's elder powers, lay defeated or captured in under 30 seconds. Wraith surveyed the scene, his synthesized voice cutting through the silence. Threats neutralized. Secure the adept. Ghost, maintain overwatch. Sci-Fi, scrub sensor logs, deploy counter-surveillance. Breaker was already checking the downed Blademasters, ensuring they were terminated. Ghost remained an unmoving statue, rifle scanning the surroundings. Sci-Fi manipulated controls on his device, and Thorne could almost feel the electronic countermeasures washing through the area, erasing records, planting false data trails. Rostova finally lowered her hand from her temple, her breathing heavy but steady. She looked at Thorne, then at the carnage, then back at the silent grey figures of Cerberus Team. Her expression was one of profound shock and dawning realization. Thorne felt a strange mix of emotions, residual fear, profound relief, and a grim, almost terrifying pride. His E-contingency wasn't just competent, they were artists of violence, operating on a level the galaxy clearly hadn't anticipated. Wraith approached Thorne. Ambassador, recommend immediate return to secure quarters via alternate route. We will handle the cleanup. Thorne nodded numbly. The Adept will be extracted for debriefing, Wraith replied tonelessly. Its knowledge may prove valuable. As Cerberus Team moved with chilling efficiency, securing the prisoner, prepping the bodies for discreet disposal, erasing their own presence, Thorne and Rostova were guided away through a service tunnel that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Back in the relative safety of their suite, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the enormity of what had happened. They sent a kill squad, Rostova breathed, sinking into a chair. Blademasters, a Void Weaver, even a rogue Psylan. They weren't testing us this time, Elias. They wanted you dead. And Cerberus dismantled them like they were breaking down obsolete machinery, Thorne said, his voice hushed. He looked at his hands. They were steady. The Council needs to understand. Humanity seeks peace. We seek cooperation. But we are not prey. He walked to his console, activating the secure channel to Terra. He needed to update High Command. But more importantly, he needed to prepare for his next appearance before the Council. The whispers of human weakness were about to be replaced by shouts of alarm. The game board hadn't just shifted, it had been violently overturned. This time, the cleanup wasn't perfect. It couldn't be. The attack had happened in a public corridor, witnessed by dozens of fleeing civilians from various species. Cerberus Team's countermeasures wiped sensor logs and electronic records, replacing them with data suggesting a catastrophic power conduit failure and secondary explosions. The official story Citadel security quickly adopted, eager to quell panic. But eyewitnesses talked. They spoke of grey figures appearing from nowhere, of impossible speed and lethal precision, of advanced technology that neutralized both physical and psionic threats effortlessly. They described insectoid warriors renowned for their speed being dismantled in seconds, a powerful spatial manipulator being shut down, a rogue Psylan incapacitated. The descriptions were confused, contradictory, filtered through fear and alien perspectives, but a common thread emerged: unknown, terrifyingly efficient defenders protecting the human ambassador. The Zylar Guild went into damage control, scrubbing mercenary contracts, severing connections, denying everything. Unit 734 felt something akin to silicon-based fear. The loss of the Xylosian was puzzling, the loss of the specialized kill squad was alarming. Their information on human capabilities was dangerously flawed. High Marshal Volag of the K'tharr received the reports with grim satisfaction mixed with newfound caution. The humans possessed warriors of unexpected caliber. Not honorable stand-up fighters, perhaps, they used stealth and technology, but undeniably effective. A race that could produce such defenders might also possess formidable fleets. His contempt began to morph into grudging respect, the kind a predator gives another dangerous predator. The Psylan Concordance felt the psychic backlash when their rogue adept was captured. Not just captured, shielded and taken. The methods used were unknown, bypassing traditional Psylan defenses. The Elder's serenity was, for the first time in centuries, tinged with genuine concern. These humans were technologically adept in ways they hadn't foreseen, particularly in countering psionics, an area where the Concordance assumed absolute superiority. The mental static around Thorne now felt less like crude jamming and more like sophisticated, layered defense. When Ambassador Thorne next entered the Grand Chamber, the atmosphere was electric. Gone was the dismissive silence or condescending whispers. Instead, there was a palpable tension, a hyper-awareness directed at the human delegation's modest platform. Delegates didn't just glance, they stared. K'tharr warriors sat straighter, their eyes watchful. Zylar units pulsed with anxious light patterns. Psylan delegates seemed withdrawn, their usual aura of effortless superiority diminished. Lumine, the council speaker, convened the session, its energy form seeming slightly less bright. Routine matters were addressed, but the focus of the chamber kept drifting back to Thorne. When a slot opened unexpectedly due to a delayed delegate, Lumine paused, then addressed Thorne directly. Ambassador Thorne. The Council notes the recent, unfortunate security incident on the station. We trust your delegation remains unharmed. It was an opening. A chance for Thorne to accuse, to demand, to expose. Thorne activated his microphone. His voice was calm, measured, but carried a new weight. Thank you, Honourable Speaker. We appreciate the Council's concern. There were indeed disturbances. Station infrastructure, we are told. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Thankfully, Terran contingency planning includes robust security protocols. Our personnel are safe. He didn't accuse. He didn't point fingers. He simply stated facts, letting the silence and the delegate's own guilty knowledge do the work. He then seamlessly transitioned. However, this does highlight the importance of stability and mutual respect within Council territories. Which brings me back to the matter of the Xanta's reroute. An action undertaken unilaterally, disrupting established commerce and harming a member state's economic prospects, ultimately contributes to instability. It creates friction where cooperation should flourish. He presented his case again. The same data, the same arguments about fairness and interstellar law. But this time, the delivery was different. There was no pleading, no hint of desperation. It was the firm, unwavering stance of someone negotiating from a position of known, if unspoken, strength. High Marshal Vorlag leaned forward, his voice rumbling, but the contempt was gone, replaced by a grudging directness. Ambassador Thorne. Your robust security protocols, are they standard for all Terran diplomatic missions? Thorne met Vorlag's gaze. High Marshal, humanity values its people. We take all necessary measures to ensure their safety, whether they are colonists on a new world or diplomats representing the Union abroad. We hope such measures are merely precautions, rarely needed among civilized species who adhere to Council law and diplomatic immunity. The veiled warning was unmistakable. Unit 734 pulsed rapidly. The Zylar Guild maintains the reroute was an economic necessity. However, given the Ambassador's persistent concerns, the Guild is willing to reopen negotiations for compensatory trade agreements for the affected Terran colonies. Perhaps a joint infrastructure investment. The offer was sudden, almost panicked. The silent elder remained silent, but Thorne felt no probing thoughts, no condescending psychic pats. Only a careful, wary neutrality. The tide had turned. Not out of sudden enlightenment or a newfound respect for human rights. It turned because of fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the grey-suited ghosts who moved unseen and struck with lethal efficiency. Fear that the noisy, primitive upstarts they had dismissed were harboring teeth far sharper than anyone had imagined. The Xanta's reroute issue wasn't solved overnight, but the negotiations suddenly became serious, respectful. Other minor petitions Thorne had filed were revisited with surprising speed. Delegations sought out Thorne during recesses, not with condescension, but with cautious curiosity, inquiring about Terran fleet disposition, technological specializations, military doctrines, information Thorne politely deflected, sticking to diplomatic channels. Humanity was still new, still vastly outnumbered and outresourced by the elder races. But they were no longer seen as easy marks or a temporary nuisance. They were an unknown quantity, capable of shocking violence when provoked, represented by a diplomat who refused to be intimidated. Weeks turned into months. Ambassador Thorne, guided by Rostova and protected by the unseen Cerberus Team, navigated the treacherous currents of galactic politics with newfound confidence. He secured fair trade deals, established embassies, and cautiously began building bridges with some of the less hostile minor races, who saw in humanity a potential counterbalance to the established powers. The K'tharr, while still gruff, treated Thorne with the wary respect due to a potentially dangerous peer. Vorlag even invited Thorne to observe a K'tharr honor duel, a significant gesture. The Zylar became almost obsequiously cooperative in trade talks, terrified of further misunderstandings. The Psylans remained aloof, but their psionic intrusion ceased entirely, replaced by careful observation from a distance. The captured Psylan adept, debriefed by Terran intelligence using techniques that bypassed its mental defenses, a combination of advanced neuro-linguistic programming, psychotropic agents, and AI-driven interrogation algorithms developed during humanity's own internal conflicts, provided invaluable insight into the political machinations of the Council's elite, revealing hidden rivalries and vulnerabilities Thorne could subtly exploit. Cerberus Team remained Thorne's silent guardians. They thwarted two further, much subtler attempts on his life, a poisoned meal detected by advanced bioscanners, and a sabotage attempt on his shuttle's life support, flagged by Cypher's routine security sweeps. In both cases, the perpetrators were identified, tracked, and dealt with discreetly, their disappearances adding to the growing mythos of humanity's shadowy capabilities. They never revealed themselves again in open combat, their strength lay in prevention, in invisibility. They were the scalpel, not the hammer, used only when necessary. One evening, Thorne stood once more at the observation window of his suite, now significantly larger and located in a much more prestigious sector, a subtle acknowledgement of humanity's changed status. He looked out at the citadel, no longer seeing just overwhelming scale, but a complex web of power, intrigue, and now, a grudging respect for his own species. Rostova stood beside him. Intel reports suggest the K'tharr are reassessing their fleet deployments along our border sectors. The Zylar have offered us preferential rates on quantum entanglement comms relays. And the Psylan Elder requested a formal dialogue on mutual security interests. Thorne nodded slowly. They don't like us, either. They may never truly trust us. But they fear us. Or at least, they fear the consequences of underestimating us. Is that enough? Rostova asked quietly. For now, it has to be, Thorne replied. We came here asking for a seat at the table. We offered peace, trade, cooperation. They responded with contempt and violence. He gestured towards the star-dusted void beyond the station. They needed to learn that humanity's hand, offered in friendship, can clench into a fist if necessary. That we value peace, but we learned long ago, in the crucible of our own world, that peace must sometimes be defended by shadows. He thought of the men and women of Cerberus Team, Wraith, Breaker, Ghost, Cypher, and the others, unseen, unheard, the silent, lethal edge of human diplomacy. They were the legacy of humanity's often brutal past, now ensuring its future among the stars. They were the reason Ambassador Elias Thorne could stand tall in the heart of galactic power, not just as a representative of a fledgling species, but as the voice of a power that had learned, the hard way, how to survive. The galaxy was vast and dangers remained. But humanity had made its statement on the Citadel. They were here to stay. And the galaxy had learned, belatedly and bloodily, that you don't screw with humans, especially the quiet ones. The HFY wasn't just about loud defiance, it was about the silent, deadly competence lurking beneath a calm exterior. The council meetings would continue, the politicking would never end, but etched into the memory of the elder races was the chilling efficiency of human special forces, a lesson learned in darkened rooms and blood-spattered corridors. Humanity's journey had just begun, and they had already taught the galaxy a vital lesson: tread carefully, for the newcomers bite back.